Hello everyone, my name is Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about books with low average ratings on Goodreads that I personally love. For the intents of this video, I defined a low average rating as everything below a 3.6 on Goodreads. So everything from like a 1 star to a 3.59 qualifies. As I was compiling my books for this video, I noticed that there were so many of them that I could definitely make a part 2 to this, possibly even a part 3. So today I'm going to talk to you about the 12 lowest rated books that I love. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. The first book I want to talk to you about is Girls Against God by Jenny Wall. This has a 3.05 out of just over 4,000 ratings. I don't have my copy of this with me. I lent this to a friend. How do I approach this? Now, Girls Against God on Goodreads, like the synopsis and also the back of the book, really makes it seem like this has a straightforward plot. Like there is a very specific story being told here. And I think this is what leads to a lot of people picking this book up and hating it, because that's just not what this book is. This is a very internal novel. It's a meditation on a lot of things. Basically, this follows a, I believe, unnamed narrator, and she's a screenwriter, and she wants to write a movie that is basically anti-art, or the death of art, and this is inspired by the artistic philosophy of black metal music. And there might be a coven of witches in this book and a time traveler. I'm honestly not sure. I've read and loved this book, and I still could not tell you the individual story beats of this. It's a book about art, the limitations of art. It's about self-expression and the limitations of self-expression. It's about wanting to express the unexpressible. And I think all of that is done so well. It's so clever. It's beautifully written. I've only read this book once and I can quote it. If God is in the mouth, we can teach you to spit. That's one of my favorite book quotes of all time, and that's from Girls Against God. It's also about alienation and being denied participation. This character is really into black metal music, but Norway of the 90s doesn't really have room in the black metal scene for teenage girls and women. This book also talks a lot about religion and possibly religious trauma and societal expectations. So it's a lot of rambling. I can admit that. It's very stream of conscious. It's this character rambling about her thoughts and talking about life. And if that sounds interesting to you at all, I would recommend this, but I don't recommend this book lightly at all. I think there is a very specific audience for this, but I couldn't really describe that audience to you. I think if you are a woman in the black metal scene or in the metal scene in general, or if you were a teenage girl in the black metal scene or metal scene in general, this could really resonate with you. I know it resonated with me a lot in my experiences being a teenager in the metal scene. It's also about rage. The main character in this is very, very angry, and if that's something that you relate to at all, that resonates with you, I think this is a good pick. This is a book about female rage, and female rage is all the rage, pun intended. This just perfectly encapsulated so many thoughts and feelings I was already having at the time when I read this. I was personally really struggling with writing. I had massive writer's block. I felt like everything I wanted to express, I couldn't. So yeah, this was such a moment for me at the time. And to this day, whenever people ask me what my favorite all-time book is, this is the first one that comes to mind. So yeah, I don't recommend this lightly, but I love it. The next book I want to talk to you about is Passerthrough by Peter Rock. This has a 3.06, but only around 300 ratings. So this might be a little bit unfair compared to the rest of this list. This follows a man named Benjamin, and his daughter Helen went missing for a week when she was a child. It is now 25 years later, and Benjamin and Helen attempt to reconnect and reconstruct what happened to her that week that she was away. This is very, very dreamlike, very nebulous and hazy. Everything has also dream logic, so you really just have to believe what this narrative tells you. You just have to go along for the ride. I don't remember the specifics of this very well because, again, it just feels like a dream. It feels like having this intense dream and waking up and being very confused what just happened to you. But I remember really, really liking it, and I remember that it really stayed with me as like a feeling, as a vibe. So yeah, if you don't like stories that are fundamentally unclear and that are supposed to be fundamentally unclear, I can't recommend this to you. If you like really, really hazy and dreamlike narratives that really lean into that, I would recommend this. I listened to the audiobook when I read it, and I thought that was a good format to read it in as well. I do want to reread this physically at some point. In at a 3.07 average rating out of just over 3,000 ratings total is The Seven Visitations of Sydney Burgess by Andy Marino. This follows a young mother, Sydney Burgess, that might or might not be possessed. The book is structured into 7 visitations, as the title would suggest, that get increasingly worse and more intense, visitations by the entity. And we just kind of watch as Sydney desperately tries to keep the life that she has built for herself intact and be a good mother for her son. I think this book is fundamentally depressing. It is very, very bleak. I do remember that there was sort of a wacky twist on the possession story in this book that I'm guessing a lot of other people didn't like. I think the characters in this are so endearing. You feel so horrible for Sydney the entire time. This book is tragic. It is so, so sad and so bleak, which I guess also might be off-putting to some readers. But yeah, I really liked it when I read it, and I really want to read It Rides a Pale Horse by Andy Marino. In fact, I might be reading that in an upcoming vlog. At a 3.16 over 15,000 ratings, we have The Need by Helen Phillips. The Need by Helen Phillips is about a mother with 2 small children who is completely exhausted. Her husband slash father of the kids is never around. She has to do everything by herself. And she starts hearing weird noises in her house, and she begins to feel followed. She's also a paleobiologist, which means that she works with extinct plants. And at the dig site that she's currently working at, strange things start to appear, like in the dig. I read this book while I was still an archaeology major, so that part of the plot was so perfect for me. This is also a type of horror that is perfect for me. It works so, so well. It is very, very subtle in a lot of ways. For example, one of the things that turns up at this dig is a Coca-Cola bottle with the label just slightly off. So a lot of this is just off kilter, it's slightly wrong, and there's such a strong sense of dread underlying this entire narrative. And The Need is genuinely one of the scariest books I've ever read. And I don't get scared while reading a lot, but The Need did it so, so well. I love this book. I think about this book all the time. And I would recommend it for both science fiction readers and horror readers, because this is, in a lot of ways, sci-fi horror. So again, if that sounds at all appealing to you, I really, really encourage you to give it a shot. I think it is so good. I also think the writing is great. Again, another one I would really like to have a physical copy of in the future to revisit because I read it digitally. Number 5 on my list is The Grip of It by Jack Jamp. This is sitting at a 3.18 average rating out of 13,000 ratings. When I read this was at like a 3.6 with significantly fewer ratings, but I assume that a lot of people picked this up after Books and Lala read it recently. This is a haunted house novel. Maybe. This follows a married couple and they're already having problems. The husband has a gambling addiction that eventually leads to them having to move to a new house. That right off the bat, there is something wrong with this house. Rooms and stairways appear and disappear, and as the house begins to decay more and more, so do the inhabitants. And I loved it. This is such an interesting twist on the haunted house story. I love that the changes in the house were also physical changes in the characters. The writing in this is beautiful. I absolutely tore through this book. This is almost 300 pages long, and I'm pretty sure I read this in 4 hours. I never read this particular copy. I read it on my Kindle and then purchased a physical copy, so I want to be rereading this very, very soon. It is weird. I'm not sure why this is so universally disliked, because I don't remember it being that weird. It's weird, but I don't remember it being like an off-putting kind of weird, but also I just like weird books. So if you like haunted house books, and if you like haunted house books with a twist, I could not recommend this more. Also, if you like haunted house books and you're kind of growing tired of the same formula over and over again, I think this could be really cool for you. I would recommend this to people that liked House of Leaves. They're not the same thing, obviously, because this is like a straightforward novel. This is completely normal in terms of formatting. But for some reason, I think those two books would play nicely off of each other. The next book I have to talk about is one that y'all are doing so dirty, and that is Brutes by Dids Tate. This is currently sitting at a 3.81 with over 12,000 ratings, and that hurts my soul. That is not what this book deserves at all. This follows a group of preteen girls, I think they're like around 11 years old, in a small town in Florida. And they refer to themselves using the collective we. So it's always like, we did that, we saw that, we spoke to, blah, 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 you get it. And they are fascinated with the older girls in their town, and they're always kind of just following people around and observing people. And because they're little girls, no one really notices that they're there. And because of that, they know a lot more than they should. And one of the older girls goes missing. And our protagonists know something about this disappearance that they're not telling the adults. I love this book so much. This was a 5 fucking star for me, dude. A hard 5-star too. This is the only true comp title to Bunny by Mona Awad I have ever found. And trust me, I have looked. Not necessarily in terms of plot, but in terms of themes, and in terms of vibe, and in terms of style, obviously. So, yeah, I love this book. This is so quintessential girlhood. These girls love each other. They would do anything for each other, but because of how girls are raised under patriarchy, they're also fiercely competitive, and they stab each other in the back, and they abandon each other in times of need because they don't understand the consequences of everything yet, because they're so young. They're confronted with so many age-inappropriate things, and no one is helping them deal with it. Yeah, I love this book. This is a book about neglect, also parental neglect. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. There is a part in this where the voice changes from we to I, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. It is such a gut punch. And yeah, I could not recommend this more highly. I absolutely love this book. Again, this is weird, but the weird element is really not that crazy. The weird element in this book is that there might or might not be a monster in the lake, and that is completely irrelevant for the vast majority of this narrative. So don't be put off by that. I love this book, and I fear some of you just don't get it, because this is not a 3.1 star at all. This is great. I love this book. Now, for the next book, if you hated this, perfectly reasonable. Perfectly understandable. In fact, I would have probably hated it if I hadn't read it at a very specific time in my life, and that is Nightshift by Kiara Latner, coming in at a 3.22 with just over 2,000 ratings. This follows 22 or 23-year-old Maggie, and she's suffering from writer's block. She can't seem to finish her master's thesis nor work on any of her personal writing. She is in a seemingly very happy and very stable relationship with her boyfriend Owen, but she soon finds herself completely enamored and infatuated with her new co-worker Sabine, and she essentially restructures her entire life to spend more time with Sabine. She switches to the night shift, and soon completely gives up on trying to write her thesis throughout the day. Her relationship with Owen begins to fall apart, and they break up. And Sabine introduces her to partying her weekends away. So she has restructured her entire life. She has set her entire life on fire for Sabine. And Sabine abandons her emotionally and physically for long stretches of time. And Maggie grows increasingly depressed and reckless and does more and more reckless things for Sabine's attention. Yeah, I understand why people hated this. Um, it is very difficult to understand why Maggie is doing any of this. I I related to her. She is sapphic, which she obviously didn't know for years of her life. She is sexually repressed. She is incredibly intelligent, and she is never surrounded by people that match her. She always has to kind of censor herself. And this is, in a lot of ways, a coming of age novel. This is a book about a young woman coming out of her shell after only knowing academics and the same boyfriend for years of her life. And it just happens to go wrong for her. Another thing I will say, the ending of this is distasteful. I think. I don't think it was the best way to end this story. I don't think it's appropriate, I guess. And from the negative reviews I've seen, a lot of people hated this ending, and that's perfectly fair. So yeah, I related to the main character in this. There's also like there is a lot of like trying to cope with the fact that she might be queer, and this obsession with her coworker. Also, I know that this is not a romance novel, but the yearning in this book is so intense, and the chemistry between Sabine and Maggie is so intense that you can almost understand why Maggie would completely fuck up her life for this woman. It is so intense, and there is a very strong will they, won't they, that just I was so engaged this entire novel, and I personally loved it, but I think it makes sense that a lot of people didn't. I don't think, yeah, this is a book I would recommend to many people. Very slightly above Nightshift with a 3.23 average rating out of just under 5,000 ratings total. We have I Have the Right to Destroy Myself by Kim Young-ha. This follows an unnamed narrator as he wanders around Seoul at night looking for lost and desperate people and suggesting suicide to them as a way to end their suffering. We also follow a pair of brothers who are in love with the same woman, and those two stories, of course, intersect. Now, I agree with every single one-star review of this book I have ever read, but I also agree with every 5-star review of this book I've ever read. I have such intense mixed feelings about this, but this was an incredibly intense reading experience for me. There was a scene in this book that I remember to this day. Also, a lot of reviews that I've seen are claiming that this book is like horribly misogynistic. I don't think that's true, personally. Horrible things happen to the women in this book, but the book makes it very clear that those things are horrible and that there are consequences for those things, and that the men in this book are horrible. That's the point. So yeah, I don't really understand that criticism of it. But yeah, overall, very intense reading experience for me. Again, don't necessarily recommend to anyone really, but if it sounds interesting to you at all, I also don't want to discourage you from reading it. So above that, at a 3.24 with over 45,000 ratings, we have Death in Her Hands by Ottessa Moshfegh. This is one that is genuinely universally disliked. So many people have read this, and so many people did not like it. Not me though. This is probably my personal second favorite Ottessa Moshfegh. My favorite is McGlue, which again I feel like is such an unpopular opinion. Even within Ottessa Moshfegh fans, McGlue is no one's favorite, but it's mine. I think I rated Death in Her Hands higher because I think, like, objectively this is a better book, but I love McGlue. Anyway, that's a tangent. Death in Her Hands is about Vesta, and Vesta is an older woman who one morning on her walk finds a note in the forest that says, "This is Martha, this is her body, I did not kill her." But there is no body attached to this note. So Vesta becomes obsessed with finding out who Martha is and solving this case. And in truly Moshfeghian fashion, it goes off the fucking rails. As you can see, I tapped the ever-loving shit out of this book. I love Tessa Moshfegh's writing so much. And I think in this book and in McClue, she's really at her best. This Vesta, I don't think, is as unlikable as many of her other characters, but the story is less digestible. This is very, very strange towards the end. It's a book about loneliness, it's a book about aging completely alone and the challenges of aging and aging alone, or living alone as an elderly person, rather. And yeah, it's a book about obsession, with a lot of these actually are. It's a theme I really, really like. It's a book about secrets, and also, this book is what I like to call an end time mystery. A mystery that refuses to follow any of the beats of mystery stories. And I love end time mysteries. My love for them began, I think, with this book, or maybe even earlier than that. But there is a video game called Whose Lighter that perfectly encapsulates a mystery that absolutely refuses to resolve itself. And that is something I absolutely love and many other people hate, which is why this has such a low effort rating. Yeah, I loved it. Don't really No, that's not true. I do recommend this book. I think a lot of people should give this a try. So, yeah. Very surprising favorite for me personally is You've Lost a Lot of Blood by Eric LaRocca. This is coming in at a 3.26 with over 8,600 ratings. Now, this is the only Eric LaRocca I have ever read that I liked. I have read You've Lost a Lot of Blood, I have read Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, and They Were Here Before Us. I hated Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. I thought that book was hilariously bad, like genuinely funny at the end. And They Were Here Before Us was just nothing. It was just annoying edgelord shit for 170 pages straight. So yeah, this is the only book by them I have ever liked. And this is the one book by them that the fans don't like, which I think is really funny. Eric LaRocca fans do not like this book, but I did. Now, how would I describe the plot of this? Basically, there are two distinct narratives happening in here. There is the diary entries or letters, perhaps, of a serial killer, and there is a more traditional narrative about a brother and sister. Sister is a game developer, and she gets the opportunity to work on, I don't remember if it's a restoration or a sequel of this video game that's basically lost media in this world. And in typically horror fashion, it goes fucking off the rails. This is science fiction horror. I don't care who disagrees with me, this is sci-fi horror. And I have mentioned this as a sci-fi horror recommendation on Reddit a couple of times, and I don't think people agree with me, generally speaking, but that's what this is. This is definitely a genre-bendy, weird book. I don't think the two distinct narratives in this ever intersect in meaningful ways, so I imagine that annoyed a lot of people. I personally am not crazy about Eric LaRocca's writing. I think they can write, but they go a little bit heavy-handed and over the top with the flowery stuff a lot, which I find irritating because I think they could do a lot tighter writing, if that makes sense. Yeah, again, personally loved it. I'm so happy I snagged like the independently published copy of this book, because I imagine with all the success that Eric LaRocca has garnered, this book will also be traditionally published and they're not gonna have a cover nearly this good. So yeah, I'm happy I own it. Again, I don't necessarily recommend this wildly, but I also think that it has more mass appeal than, for example, Things Have Gotten Worse, which has been widely read. So take that as you will. The second to last book is Tinfoil Butterfly by Rachel Eve Moulton with 3.29 stars out of over 2,000 ratings. So again, just not very many ratings on this book in particular. I know that Kayla from Books and Lala really likes it, and that is one of the few books where our tastes really align. This is about Emma, and Emma is running from something. We, at the beginning of this book, don't know why she's on the run. but she's hitchhiking across America. She has a run-in with a violent man, and that leaves her stranded at an abandoned gas station where she meets a little boy in a tinfoil mask named Earl, and Earl begs Emma for help getting rid of George. And that's all I will tell you about the story. Again, I don't think this book is nearly as weird as people make it out to be. It's weird, but in terms of structure, it's very straightforward. It is very clearly a novel with a plot. The plot in it might be a little weird, but everything makes sense. It is not nonsensical. So I don't really understand why so many people hate this. Again, it's a book about trauma. It's a book about overcoming trauma. It's a book about the responsibility adults have towards children. It's about the collective responsibility of caring for children in a society. It's about child abuse, obviously. I think it was a very, very interesting book. Beautifully written as well. I have not gotten to her second book yet, but I would really like to. Yeah. I would recommend this a lot more readily than other books on this list. But based on how many books I love that the internet hates, I might just not be a very reliable source for recommendations. And the final book I want to talk to you about is The Guest by Emma Cline. This is coming in at a 3.29 average rating with over 87,000 ratings. So yeah, I might just be wrong here. If out of 87,000 people, not enough people like this to raise the average rating of this immensely, then I might just be the problem. I can admit that. But I love this book. I have read The Girls by Emma Cline, which was her debut, which a lot more people liked, but I didn't. So take that as you will. This is about Alex, and she makes a mistake at the dinner party the much older man she is seeing and staying with is hosting. And this leads him to basically abandon her. And we just follow her as she wanders around Long Island, now homeless, for 3 days. This book is so fucking liminal, dude. It is so liminal. There are so many, like, empty spaces that shouldn't be empty that Alex wanders through. And Alex is a very, very detached narrator. She is horribly anxious, but in order to protect herself from this anxiety and fear, she disassociates constantly. So she is horribly anxious, and there are things that she needs to do, and she just does not do them because she is so paralyzed by this fear and by her dissociation. She's also running from something, or someone, rather. And that's why she puts so much hope in this older man in the first place, because she needs someone to rescue her. And she is so young, she's 22, and she's so alone. And I think her character made perfect sense to me. In that same situation, I would also be feeling the same way. And I generally related to her a lot because I deal with my emotions, or rather don't deal with my emotions, in very similar ways. When something happens that I don't really know how to cope with, I just kind of suppress it, and it's this constant, like, simmering anxiety that I just kind of ignore and hope it goes away, and that's exactly what Alex does in this. I imagine a lot of people hated this because if that doesn't work for you, and if you don't feel this constant sense of dread throughout reading this book, you would find this very boring, I believe. The ending is also kind of open, which, again, many people do not like. Also, I believe this was originally marketed as a thriller, which was a mistake on the publisher's end. Because is this thrilling if it works for you? Yes. Is the genre of this thriller? No. This is a literary fiction novel. But I thought this was terrifying. Very, very subtly terrifying. Unsettling. So dread-filled. I'm trying to think what would be a good comparison for this. Maybe the constant underlying fear of Eyes Wide Shut, the Stanley Kubrick film, but without the actual threat. I don't know if that helps at all, but that's really what this felt like to me. And I loved this book. I think about this book all the time. I annotated the absolute fuck out of this book. Also, it is beautifully written. The descriptions are beautiful. It also does meditate on class a lot because Alex didn't grow up rich and is now surrounded by a lot of people that did and a lot of people that are currently rich. Alex kind of hates everyone, which honestly I understand. In her position, I would be doing exactly the same thing. So yeah, this only works if you A, relate to Alex in any way, or B, the constant sense of dread in this works for you. For me, it did both, so I adored this. And that was the final book. We have made it. Thank you so much for sticking around. I will probably do a second part of this in the future with the next 12 books on my list because, yeah, I have just read and loved a lot of books that other people absolutely hated. Let me know in the comments if you have read and liked any of these or if there is a book with a very low average rating that you like. I will talk to you soon. Bye bye.